Alright everybody, we're down to the top 200 greatest atheists of all time, according to public vote. 200 is Johannes Weiss-Licenus. He's the guy who got God kicked out of chemistry. In 1885, Weiss-Licenus became the new chemistry professor at University of Leipzig, replacing Hermann Kolbe, and during his tour of the chemistry lecture hall, saw the periodic table with the quote, "God has arranged all things by measure and number and weight," from the wisdom of Solomon in the Bible above the periodic table, to which he promptly gave the directive that must disappear. 199, we have Jim Jeffries, an Australian born American stand-up comedian. He's famous for saying the smart are always asking questions, and that's like cancer to religion.
This is the thing about people who believe in God. They're idiots. And there's no dancing around it. You're a borderline fucking mentalist. You're an idiot. You're like a 13-year-old kid who still believes in Santa. Oh, I'm still gonna get killed. Oh, fuck you. You know, I don't hate people who believe in God. I don't hate them, right? But I just don't want to talk to them. I don't want to be around them. It's like how I don't hate the mentally insane, right? But the mentally insane and religious people are the same fucking bag. If I'm standing at a bar chatting to either of them, eventually I'll walk away going, okay.
Jeremy Bentham, 198. In 1780, he introduced his Principles of Morals and Legislation, wherein he attempts to outline a utility theory of happiness, according to which nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. Jean de Brulé, he was classified as an Enlightenment figure, non-believer. He famously said that a pious or sanctimonious man is one who under an atheist king would be an atheist. Jean Bodin, he was classified as a secret atheist. In his colloquium on the 7 about secrets of the sublime, 1580, was an underground classic of 17th century atheism. 195, we have Jean Francois de la Barre, who at the age of 20 in 1766, who was previously a French nobleman, was tortured, had his tongue cut out, and was beheaded before his body was burnt along a priory with a copy of Voltaire's Philosophical Dictionary nailed to his torso.
1766, en juillet. Belle saison pour la torture, l'élevage et l'agriculture.
Jacques Monod was a French atheist and protein chemist. He is known for his 1790 Chance and Necessity, wherein he supposes that without God, everything boils down to chance and necessity. This is incorrect, in that the modern view is an anti-chance view of things. Jacob Molschat, he's a physiologist who disabused God from physiological chemistry. He stated, "Forces no impelling God, no entity separate from the material substratum." He's famous for saying that no thought without phosphorus. He lost his post at Heidelberg University for his controversial physiological lectures. Ibn Warraq, he is a one of the more famous ex-Muslim atheists. In 1995 he published Why I Am Not a Muslim. It's a pretty good book. It's stylized on Bertrand Russell's 1927 Why I Am Not a Christian. And he's characterized as the first Muslim history of doubt stylized book. Al-Rawandi is one of the top 10 or 20 Arabic free thinkers, a skeptic of Islam. He disputed the reality of the miracles of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus and Muhammad, and claimed that they were fraudulent tricksters. Henry Mencken, he's the famous witty reporter that we saw during the Scopes Monkey trial.
Why are we journalists, Charles? And I'm not talking about women as second raters. I'm talking about the best journalists alive. Evolution is progress. No legislation should attempt to steal this hope from the people.
He also translated Nietzsche's The Antichrist, his treatise on gods, and he stated, religion is so absurd that it comes close to imbecility. Hubert Harrison, who we've touched on, he was known as the Black Socrates, and he supposedly proudly declared his atheism, stating that, show me a population that is deeply religious, and I will show you a servile population, content with whips and chains. Honoré de Balzac, in 1836, he wrote a short story called The Atheist Mass, whose main character is Dr. Desplein, whose tongue-in-cheek statements are, his bold and unqualified atheism was like that of many scientific men, the best men in the world, but invincible atheists. Heraclitus is the famous flux and fire philosopher. He said that everything in the universe, all it is made neither of gods nor of men, but ever has been and ever will be an eternal living fire, kindled and extinguished in destined measure. He's a classical disbeliever, according to Jennifer Hott's History of Disbelief.
Fire is the principle or arche of all things. The reason why fire is the principle of all things is that it acts as an orchestra conductor of things. Fire acts as a conductor because the world is, according to Heraclitus, in a permanent state of change.
Heinrich Heine famously said that if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. If your right arm offends you, cut it off. And if your reason offends you, become a Catholic. Graydon Square, he was a physics major, an Iraq War veteran turned atheist rapper.
Creationism gives us a big laugh. You sided with the side of spells and witchcraft. Ouija boards and such. Your mind is a church and you got the windows boarded up. Aren't you bored or what? I guess ain't nothing getting in. And I bet the only thing you care about is spitting in.
Poggio Braccolini was an Italian humanist who in 1417 scoured around the German monasteries in search of rare humanist books of antiquity and rediscovered Lucretius's 1555 BC On the Nature of Things. And when he had 50 copies made, and this launched or brought us out of the Dark Ages. George Lichtenberg is an experimental physicist focused on electrical theory, but he wrote a whole series of notebooks which are interesting to read. He says, for example, I thank the Lord 1,000 times for having made me become an atheist. At 174 we have George Washington, the first U.S. president, who was a semi-labeled atheist who did not believe in the Christian system, as he reportedly told Governor Morris, who in turn told this to Jefferson repeatedly. During the battle at Valley Forge, he had the troops read publications by Thomas Paine. And he famously said that when he needed mechanics for his estate, he said, if they be good workmen, they may be from Asia, Africa, or Europe, they may be Mohammedans, Jews, or Christians, or they may be atheists. With Washington, the first American president, we come to the topic of the so-called founding fathers of America, the top 5 shown here. Jefferson was a self-defined Epicurean materialist, labeled atheist. Madison was a labeled atheist, was an anti-Episcopalian. John Adams was a free thinker and irreligionist. Franklin was an atheist labeled deist, self-defined thinker. And George Washington was an atheist labeled deist, non-Christian system-believing president. The signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 was done by Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin. Shown here is their hot disbeliever ranking, 14, 17, and 13. George Holyoke, he's the coiner of the term secularism. In lecture he said, I do not believe there is such a thing as a God. Fyodor Dostoevsky, he is the famous Russian novelist who portrayed in works such as The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from the Underground, the situation or collision wherein religion dissolves out and physics-based positivism takes over, or scientific reductionism, wherein he conceived his views from the works of Charles Fourier, Henry Buckle, and Adolphe Quetelet.
Their lives parallel each other to a degree that's somewhat miraculous in some sense. It's quite uncanny. Dostoevsky was obviously a literary figure, whereas Nietzsche was a philosopher, a literary philosopher, but still a philosopher. And Dostoevsky wrestled with exactly the same problems that Nietzsche wrestled with. But he did it in a different way. He did it in a literary manner. And he has this great book, The Brothers Karamazov, and in that book, the hero of the book is really Alyosha, who's a monastic novitiate, a very good guy, kind of not an intellect, but a person of great character, you know.
Friedrich Schiller, the famous companion of Goethe, said, there must be a morality which suffices without faith. Frederick II of Persia founded one of the greatest Enlightenment kingdoms in history. He communicated greatly with Voltaire, and he had Julien Lemaitre as his physician or court atheist, as Voltaire stylized him. Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, he was the purported author of a treatise on 3 impostors, which said that Muhammad, Jesus, and Moses were 3 impostors who founded each religion respectively. He conducted rather unorthodox, as we might say in modern times, experiments. For example, he put prisoners up in a cask and let them die to see if a soul would come out or could be observed through a little hole that was drilled in the cask. He also did a language deprivation experiment where he had children raised by foster mothers and nurses who were not allowed to speak to the children, the aim of which was to discover the language that was imparted unto Adam and Eve. Francois Rabelais is characterized as an aggressive atheist, ape of Lucian, Democritus reborn, or a secular sage. He's noted for his 1532 The Life of Gargantua and Pantagruel, wherein he tells this adventure of 2 giants named Gargantua and his son Pantagruel, full of messy carousing, unceremonious sexual adventures, excretions and general muck, wherein they made fun of priests, scripture, church hierarchy, and ritual. Francis Bacon, he stated, the Trinitarian believes a virgin to be the mother of a son who is her maker. Ferdinand Magellan stated, the church says the earth is flat, but I know that it is round, for I have seen a shadow on the moon, and I have more faith in a shadow than in the church. Euripides, Greek philosopher, he said it was a wise man who invented God. Étienne Dolet, humanist, materialist, secular, translator, printer. He was a rumored materialist. He denied the immortality of the soul. He was convicted of the crime of atheism, tortured, strangled, and burned with his books. Ethan Allen, one of the founding fathers of America, famously in 1784, during his wedding ceremony to his second wife, was required to pledge to live with Fanny Buchanan, agreeable to the laws of God. At that moment he halted the ceremony in protest and only continued after it was specified that this meant the God of nature as envisioned by a Spinozan like a deist. Ernest Haeckel, he was the biggest atheist after Goethe to carry forward his elective affinities theories. Ernestine Rose, top female atheist, she said, it is an interesting and demonstrable fact that all children are atheists, and were religion not inculcated into their minds, they would remain so. Empedocles, the famous four-element two-force theory philosopher, was reputed to have taught atheism in Greece, one of the first professors of atheism. Emma Goldman, a noted female disbeliever according to Hitchens, in 1916 penned The Philosophy of Atheism.
To give an adequate exposition of the philosophy of atheism, it would be necessary to go into the historical changes of the belief in a deity, from its earliest beginning to the present day. But that is not within the scope of the present paper. However, it is not out of place to mention, in passing, that the concept God, supernatural power, spirit, deity, or in whatever other term the essence of theism may have found expression, has become more indefinite and obscure in the course of time and progress. In other words, the God idea is growing more impersonal and nebulous in proportion as the human mind is learning to understand natural phenomena and in the degree that science progressively correlates human and social events.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she's the author of the first women's secular Bible. She stated, clergymen are still preaching sermons on the rib origin of women, and I have endeavored to dissipate these religious superstitions from the minds of women and base their faith on science and reason. Edward Gibbon, 148, he's the author of the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's a secular historical treatise, and he blamed Christianity for the fall of Rome. Edgar Allan Poe is famous. His prose poem Eureka, 1848, according to Joseph McCabe, embodies a pantheism which is not far removed from agnosticism. Diodorus Siculus, he gave a description of the origin of man from the slime of the earth, which goes back to the Greeks, and he influenced Lucilio Benini, who, as we saw, was burned at the stake. He said the myths about Hades and the gods, although they are pure inventions, help to make men virtuous. Diagoras of Melos, he's the first person in history to self-identify in a positive way as an atheist. He was judged guilty of atheism because he divulged the Orphic doctrine, published the Mysteries of Ulysses and Cabriès, and he also chopped up a wooden statue of Hercules to boil his turnips, and he openly declared that there was no God at all. Denis Diderot, the famous encyclopedist, is noted for an anecdotal story in that he supposedly was the one that converted Baron de Holbach from a deist into an atheist. Democritus, one of the second-ranked atomic theorists, whose student was Epicurus, whose mentor was Leucippus. David Cross, atheist comedian.
One of my favorite things about the Bible is how antiquated all the things that are supposed to take place in the future are already. How all the prophecies, how completely antiquated they are. Because, you know, when the Bible was written and then rewritten and then edited and then re-edited and then translated from dead languages and then retranslated and then re-edited and then re-edited and then retranslated and then given to kings for them to take their favorite parts out and then re-edited and then retranslated and then re-edited and then given to the Pope for him to approve and then retranslated and then rewritten, then rewritten, re-edited, retranslated, re-edited again, all based on stories that were told orally 30 to 90 years after they happened to people who didn't know how to write.
At 138 we have Critias. He is famous for arguing or supposing that lawgivers of ancient times invented God as a kind of overseer of right and wrong actions of men. Helvetius, he was mistaken as the author of the System of Nature by Holbach. His view was that a man who believes that he eats a god we do not call mad, but a man who says he is Jesus Christ we call mad. Christopher Marlowe, he was England's most famous alleged atheist, and he was charged by the Privy Council as follows: into every company comes, he persuades men to atheism, willing them not to be afraid of bugbears and hobgoblins. He was arrested and freed on bail, and a few days later he was stabbed in a tavern quarrel at the age of 29. Charlie Chaplin, by simple common sense, I don't believe in God, in none. Charles Bradlaugh, he's famous for putting his foot down after he got elected to a seat in Parliament, in that he refused to take the oath of allegiance, which said that he had to swear and say, "So help me God." He didn't want to do that, and he engaged in a legal battle, which culminated in the Oaths Act of 1888. Brian Fleming, 2005, he was kind of in the new atheism movement. He published a documentary, The God Who Wasn't There, where he interviews Richard Carrier, Sam Harris, among others.
The sun used to revolve around the earth. It was like that for hundreds of years, until it was discovered to be otherwise. And even for a few hundred years after that. But ultimately, after much kicking and screaming, the earth did, in fact, begin to revolve around the sun. Christianity was wrong about the solar system. What if it's wrong about something else, too?
Put your hands together.
Bobby Henderson, he is the founder of Pastafarianism, which originated from his 2005 satirical letter to the Kansas School Board over concerns of children being taught intelligent design alongside evolution theory.
If someone believes something that you don't, it's always crazy. I think believing in a guy who walked on water and a guy who split at the sea is crazy. And they say to me, my religion is crazy, but yeah, what's the difference?
Bhagat Singh, while he was in prison in 1930, penned an essay, Why I Am Not an Atheist, in response to a deeply religious inmate who thought he became an atheist because of his vanity. Barack Obama, one of the first loosely secular labeled atheist presidents, on 2016, in an interview with Bill Maher, he said, we should foster a culture in which people's private religious beliefs, including atheists and agnostics, are respected. Bahram Moshi, he's a Persian chemical engineer, promotes atheism and scientific thought in Iran. He says, I am not interested in heaven nor scared of hell. For me, heaven is a place where freedom exists. Aristophanes in 390 BC published a satirical play called The Clouds, which tells a dialogue between or about the nature of rain, whether it is natural or the pee of Zeus. Anaximander 109, he's classified by Cudworth as the chief of the old atheistic philosophers. He was the immediate successor of Thales. He taught that the earth was not really connected with the planets, and that the latter were inhabited just like the earth, and that the fixed stars were centers of other planetary systems, and that the sun was a glowing mass, and after studying fossils, argued that fish grew from warm mud, and that humans evolved from fish. Al-Razi is characterized as the single figure most frequently denounced and disproved as a heretic in the history of Islamic thought, according to Jennifer Haidt. Thomas Edison, he says, so far as religion of the day is concerned, it's a damn fake. Religion is all bunk. My mind is incapable of conceiving such a thing as a soul. I may be in error, and man may have a soul, but I simply do not believe it. One on two, we have Ayn Rand and Karl Marx.
You do not accept the existence of a God, a divine prime mover, right?
No.
Now, the reason you don't is because you can't prove that such a entity or being or energy exists.
I can't, nor can anyone else. There is no proof.
There is no proof that there is no. So therefore, you've concluded that there isn't one.
That's right.
You can't prove there isn't.
You are never called upon to prove a negative. That's
right.
A law of logic. Right. When you accept such an important issue as the creation of the universe,
yes,
on faith, you're destroying your confidence and the validity of your own mind. It has to be either reason or faith. I am against God for the reason that I don't want to destroy reason. I don't...
Give us a chance, all right? We appreciate your zeal, but if you continue that, it's going to make it difficult for the other people to absorb what's going on here.
He says, how can I be against God? I'm against those who conceived that idea.
Yeah, tell us why. Tell us why.
Because then it gives man permission to function irrationally, to accept something above and outside the power of their reason, and superior to reason.
Okay, I just want to get this in before we break. You're an atheist.
Yes. I could do the same to you, you know.
What?
Marxist-Leninist atheism, also known as Marxist-Leninist scientific atheism, is a part of the wider Marxist-Leninist philosophy, which was irreligious and anti-clerical, while at the same time advocating a materialist understanding of nature. Marxism-Leninism holds that religion is the opium of the people, in the sense of promoting passive acceptance of suffering on earth in the hope of eternal reward. Therefore, Marxism-Leninism advocates the abolition of religion and the acceptance of atheism. In addition, Marxist-Leninist scientific atheism purports to explain the origin of religion, as well as what it teaches to be scientific criticism of it. Marxist-Leninist atheism has its roots in the philosophy of Ludwig Feuerbach and W. F. Hegel.